everyone, my name is Kayla and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about some of the most important constitutional rights that we have and a few misconceptions I feel like people have about them. We'll be talking about freedoms and protections that kind of shape our everyday life and our freedom of speech, our religion, and all the things like that. And so what is really interesting to me is that most Americans actually know a lot of these, but they don't fully understand what limits they have and the limitations, and I kind of just want to clear them up and explain a little bit because these are freedoms that we really want to protect and they're really important to know about. Okay, so the first part is going to be freedom of religion, and I think when most people feel that idea of freedom in their religious views, I feel like they think it means being able to practice whatever faith that they want, and that's true, but that's kind of only half of the story. The First Amendment actually has two parts, which is the embellishment clause and the free exercise clause, which the embellishment clause means that the government can't promote or favor a religion over another, or create an official religion for the government, I guess, if that makes sense. The free exercise clause means that individuals can believe and practice whatever they want, but it's not you can't be biased, I guess, when it comes to government. And a big misconception is that freedom kind of applies everywhere, but organizations like schools and workplaces can actually set limits on religious expressions if it disrupts other policies. And it's kind of a balance of protecting your faith while also respecting other people, because that can kind of get really challenging, again, the workplaces and schools. So kind of having certain policies in place are helpful, but you do have the freedom to express your religion, if that makes sense. So the next slide is freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is probably the most recognized, but also I feel the most misunderstood, especially nowadays. I feel so many people are taking their freedom of speech and, being really shameful and dragging the country down. I feel there's so many views again about where this can go, but I think a lot of people think that they can say anything anywhere without consequences, but that is not true at all. And that goes both ways, not even just about political parties, literally just anyone in the day-to-day world can needs to be careful and cautious of what they say and how they're saying things. So the First Amendment protects speech from the government punishment, but it doesn't mean that you can say anything again, whatever you want. On social media platforms, that's definitely not a place to be violent or vulgar when it comes to your speech. There are going to be certain consequences. Same thing with a misconception about hate speech. It is not protected at all. Actually, speech that incites violence, makes true threats and that kind of thing, it encourages actions from actual law enforcement to step in, because again, you can't just go out you can't go out being violent and saying hurtful things and aggressive things that can lead to misconceptions about what you're trying to say. So people take your words very seriously, especially when you post them on the internet, and just being cautious about that is really important. So we have the broad right to express ourselves, but that freedom comes again with responsibility and protecting open debate, and nothing harmful or dangerous behavior as well. So I hope that makes sense. Freedom of press. So the freedom of press ensures journalists that they can report the truth without fear of what the government could do and punish them for. It allows them to kind of hold their leaders accountable and keep the public informed of what's going on, and that is really important because I feel reporting true media should not be it should not make people scared to do. It should make people actually really encouraged to share the truth, and I feel like that's super important to like hold the public, people accountable of what's actually going on. However, some people believe that this means that they can be punished by absolutely anything, and that is not legally right at all. You can't publish false information about people that damages their reputation, but you can report everything true, and you have no consequences, and that right protects you. There's also a misconception that the government controls what we see in the news, and most censorships actually come from social pressures, not really government laws, and the goal is to kind of keep freedom to flow information by being open and honest, and that is kind of where this amendment comes in, and I feel like a lot of people kind of have been taking advantage of this, but it's really important, again, to kind of hold people accountable to the truth. Next is search and seizure. The Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures, which kind of mean that the police usually need warrants to like search your home, your car, your phone, that kind of thing, your purse, whatever your belongings are on you. But people get confused when it comes to the exceptions. So if you give consent, if something illegal is in plain view, or if there's like an emergency, and officers don't always need a warrant for those circumstances. Another misconception is that digital information is private just because it's deleted on like your phone storage, iCloud, but in reality, police can still access those records with proper legal permission. And this amendment actually is all about protecting your privacy and making sure that law enforcement acts fairly and with a cause. Again, that's something really important because some people make claims and that kind of thing, and that can lead to a lot of legal issues if, a police officer doesn't take that serious or you don't understand your rights. So that's really important just to kind of know about in general. Next up is the due process of law. So this means that the government actually must act fairly and follow legal procedures before taking someone's life. So not just their life, but it's like their liberty, their property, all that kind of thing. Most people associate due process with criminal cases, but again, actually applies to like civil issues as well, like losing your driver's license, being fired, that kind of thing. And a big misunderstanding is that due process guarantees specific outcomes. So like being found innocent, it actually doesn't. It ensures that the process is fair and you get a chance to be heard. But that that decision that is made by the law is not like a bias or an emotional kind of decision. It's just like the facts of being found innocent or guilty. Our Ninth Amendment is one of the most overlooked but important ones that I personally think. It's basically just because a right isn't written in the Constitution, that doesn't mean that people don't have them. This is an amendment that's called unenumerated rights, such as right to privacy, to travel, or to make personal family decisions. A common misconception is that if someone or something isn't listed in the Bill of Rights, that it doesn't exist, but actually the Ninth Amendment reminds us that our freedoms extend beyond what's just on paper, so it's kind of a safeguard for like our personal liberty. And maybe I'll give an example, kind of what's happening in my personal life. Like, I'm choosing to not vaccinate my children. I wasn't vaccinated as a child. I've never been vaccinated, and those are just kind of like personal choices that I feel like, again, they're not just like plainly written in the Constitution, but you have personal rights like that. Kind of also goes back to a little bit of religious rights from like my personal situation, but that's kind of just an example of like, oh, someone chooses to vaccinate their children versus not. It's not like a law. It's just like the freedom everyone has to make decisions like that, without like being forced one way or another. Our 10th Amendment focuses on the balance of powers between the federal government and the states. So it says that any power not given to the federal government belongs to the states or the people. Many Americans kind of assume that the federal government kind of controls everything, but states actually handle things like education, your health, your public safety, again, like local laws, and misconceptions in states that can override federal law, but it's not true. Federal law is like the supreme law of the land, and the 10th Amendment just ensures that local governments have authority over local issues, if that makes sense. Next is Equal Protection Clause. So this is part of the 14th Amendment, and it ensures that laws are applied fairly to everyone. So it doesn't mean everyone is treated the exact same. It means that people in similar situations should be treated equally under the law. So many people think it is only referring to like racial equality, but it actually extends to gender, your age, and your disability. This clause has been essential in Supreme Court cases involving like civil rights, education, same-sex marriage. It's kind of just like the overall fairness of our justice system, and it doesn't kind of steer one way or another based on like your sexual orientation, your education choices, like who you choose to marry, that kind of thing. Now, discrimination. Discrimination happens when people are obviously treated unfairly because of things like their race, their gender, their religious views, disabilities, that kind of thing. But most people know it's illegal. That's something that is a lot more talked about than some of these other ones. But they might not realize that the law differs from state to state. So, an example, some states include protections for sexual orientation or like your gender identification, but others don't. And a misconception is that discrimination only happens intentionally, but sometimes it's built into our system or our policies that unintentionally hurt certain groups. And so kind of understanding these patterns help us kind of create a more fair workplace and community just to like overall be involved in. And yeah, I think that's important to kind of know that some people do it unintentionally, but it is still happening, if that makes sense. And lastly, to wrap up, I just want to let everyone know that it's important to remember our rights and that they're not just words on a document, they're actually living protections to help shape our everyday life, and knowing the truth about them can help us recognize like the misinformation. We can actually like stand up for when the rights are threatened, because that's what keeps our country going. Again, there's been a lot going on in the world, and just taking your time to like learn about your Constitution and what these issues are, and like understanding your rights can help you better protect them and keep our nation going strong. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit. I definitely am like passionate about some of these, so I hope you learned something, and yeah, I will see you sometime probably next week.